So I started watching Criminal Minds when I was like 15, 16, when I was over at my friend's house. We'd settle down with our snacks while her mom was off or in the other room or something, and we'd just settle in to watch 3 or 4 episodes of women just getting absolutely tortured. Like not in normal ways, in special ways. We'd just like be sitting around talking about who everyone's dance partner was for Master of the House and like talking about math homework while in the background women were just getting and I often wonder, like, why the hell we did that. I know there is kind of an official link between women and gory crime, which, you know, I'm gonna leave figuring out why that's a thing to sociologists and also people who are getting paid. There was the white boy of the month of the show, super genius Spencer Reed, who always ensured that our most watched episodes of the show were the one where he makes out with Amber Reed, and the ones where he goes through a lot of trauma and gets like forcibly addicted to heroin. Let me tell you, being a teenage girl who refused to have a crush on One Direction back then was hard work. We were also pretty nerdy, so like it was a cop show, but it felt a little more thoughtful than your standard 911 cop on the ground type deal. It was like the intersection of true crime and a procedural show that we could watch with whatever girl's parents could drop her off that day. Every episode is exactly the same. It follows a highly specialized team of feds, the Behavioral Analysis Unit, or BAU, and they use psychology to catch the world's sickest murderers. Episodes always open and close with just some quote that a writer's assistant definitely pulled from quotes.com that's ever so vaguely related to the plot of the episode. We always cut from black to some violent, eye-catching murder. Then they fly to the location where the murder happens. They like brainstorm / pontificate some more on their fancy private jet. They get some info from the local PDs, someone else dies. Then they use all that information to present a profile, which is their best guess of that murderer's deepest regrets and fears, entirely based on the score marks they left on like Panini Press. Then they present this profile to a semicircle of dutifully silent uniformed cops who are never seen or heard from again. And I only really noticed this on my last depressive comfort viewing spiral. While the agents are all obviously different people with technically what should be different opinions, there's just so much exposition needed so that viewers will understand what the hell is going on. So they play it off as brainstorming, but it's actually one monologue split sentence by sentence to different people, kind of like a stage reading of a bad poem.
It's type 2.
The adaptive Satanist is the one you have to worry about, rationalizing his fantasies by blaming them on outside forces.
Like Satan.
Whether you're religious or not, the presence of satanic elements can affect even the most experienced investigators.
There is always a shootout where the next victim is always seconds away from being brutally murdered before the agents like bust down the door, guns drawn, and then just like that, they're back on the plane, recounting their traumas, and then they put the end quote over a B-roll shot of the plane flying, and then cut to black. Time for Celebrity Jeopardy. So that's all well and good, but it's not exactly why I'm here. I am here specifically because in 2010, they made an episode where the crime was a bunch of terrified migrants crossing the US-Mexico border, getting their heads chopped off.
Why? Why?
The episode opens with a man on a four-wheeler just beheading a terrified man with a machete in the middle of the desert. And the action really gets started when a bunch of teens find a bunch of similar heads in a trash can outside the sheriff's office. It's not like more trauma porn than the normal murder and disfigurement that's always on this show, but for some reason to me, this felt kind of personal. And I don't really know how to explain it. So the feds come into this border town that is just completely overrun with crime and human trafficking, and the sheriff who's just so sick of all this overwhelming gang activity, but obviously is still hoping to protect the lives of the people she's hoping to turn straight back at the river. But she's actually the good one because all her underlings are like actively, openly hostile to the immigrant community. The villain kills a few more people, including the sheriff, and he tries to frame the local drug lord / criminal fiend before he's actually revealed to be one of the white cops just trying to keep this town American like the good old days. And obviously there's another shootout and they kill the villain and like, hooray for the feds, I guess? And the episode ends and I am just sure that everyone involved was like, what an interesting progressive take on this hot button issue. We nailed it. They think they got away with their crimes because they made the sheriff Hispanic and the villain a white cop. But I see through this Obama-era ass social commentary. Early on, they have a cop and an immigration advocate get into a fight.
Well, maybe you shouldn't spend your time helping illegals sneak into the country. They only want a better life. Well, then they ought to come in the front door.
Gentlemen, another day?
I feel like I could almost see the showrunner and some of his executive producers being like, yes, we are honoring both sides of this contentious debate. We are so culturally relevant. Meanwhile, the racism is like just dripping off of the rest of it in ways that I bet they didn't even notice. Because how can you notice that something is red if you're always wearing rose-colored glasses? Right? I think. So there's this new term that I just made up, although I'm sure it's probably been used a bunch before, but I don't have access to JSTOR anymore. I'm just gonna call it writer's bias. The idea that any idea a writer has about any person they're creating is correct, but only because they are the ones writing them. I've kind of mentioned this in my I Love Lucy video, where Aaron Sorkin might not think it's a bad look to have his main character make fun of another girl for being silly and vapid, because his main character is right, but only because the girl that she's making fun of is a figment of his imagination. So of course she's as stupid and vapid as she needs to be to make his main character not look like a total asshole for making fun of her. So this whole episode is full of that, but the thing that offended me the most was when these agents go into someone's house, guns drawn, fingers on triggers, because they think that he's running a business, promising to help immigrants, and then ransoming them. But in the previous scene, you see the process of them finding this house, and their data parameters are people with short-term leases, people who have a criminal record, and people who are using more utilities than normal. Like, those three things justify this introduction. Just on a data search for that information, they felt it was necessary to immediately have their guns pointed at whoever opened that door. And they were right, obviously, because Spencer Reid is never wrong. But that's not real life. In what real situation would that be an appropriate reaction to that information? But because the writers wrote this guy to be a scumbag who keeps immigrants in a horse stable, they were right to pistol whip him. Fucking pistol whip him, we don't care. There's also this scene early on where the agents show up to the sheriff's office and are met by a small army, which is what they call them in the show, and these guys standing in front of the station say, I'm here because someone I know was arrested for a crime that he did not commit, so I am exercising my First Amendment right to peaceably protest. And even though they got the guy to say it all menacing, like, he's right, they were literally trying to frame their boss for something he didn't do. But since it turns out that the guy they're protecting is an evil sadist, like, how dare they just stand around? Okay, I didn't really have anywhere else to talk about this, but I definitely need to mention, in the final shootout, a bad cop comes in, he shoots a bunch of gang-affiliated people, shoots his buddy cop because he's trying to blame it on the head drug dealer. So first, I want to play you a scene where a nice white girl is murdered. And now, let me show you the scene I just described.
Don't do something stupid, Jose.
The more I think about it, the angrier I get. Like, what is this Puss in Boots ass music? What were the search terms in the audio library where they found this track? Fun and funky Mexican murder scene? Why is he like mowing them down like he's John Wick? Why, even for a minute, does this guy get to look cool? But obviously, I think we know, right? The writers agree, these guys were thugs. Fuck them. I also wanted to talk a little bit about writing an episode like this in Hollywood and substituting what I assume is the LA area for the Rio Grande Valley. A fun little fact about me is that I used to be an extra in some movies. And you know, what I was using was just an automated casting service. And when you're someone like me who gets an extras call for a migrant or gang member, you know that something is not right. I almost did take the migrant job for absolute shits because it was like a human trafficking situation on a procedural cop show that I'm sure was trying to be equally as culturally relevant. But then I just thought to myself, think of the outfits. Think of the fake dirt they're gonna put on your face. I could not do it. I'll just leave it with this. If you are making a show about the fraught immigrant journey and you end up having to tell that story by casting a bunch of frat bros from West Covina, you have a problem. Here's another funny comparison. Here's the monologue they give the psychopathic drug dealer to prove just how deranged he really is.
I cut him from crotch to chin and leave his intestines open for the animals. After, I sent his left hand to his wife, his eyes to his mother, and his tongue to his kids. Was a note saying that their papa died wetting himself. A coward.
And now I'm gonna read from this actor's IMDb page. He was born and raised in the wine country of Napa Valley in Northern California. He graduated from Napa High School as a standout all-league football player and received a football scholarship to Sacramento State. He graduated with a degree in business administration and theater arts, as well as being a member of the prestigious Phi Delta Theta fraternity, a political and environmental activist whose main fight is to preserve the earth and her many endangered animals and wildlife sanctuaries. Do you think that that is really the best role for this man? He does a fine job with it, but how could this be like an accurate portrayal of a border town drug dealer? I know about as much about that lifestyle as he does. Also, to be an alumni of the Phi Delta Theta fraternity, and for these to be the roles that your agent sends you, must get kind of frustrating after a while. And I just wanted to contrast this really quickly with a movie like Sing Sing, where formerly incarcerated people played versions of themselves making a movie about making art while incarcerated. They were able to capture the essence of who these people are and what they go through because they know what it's like. More so, I would assume, than the writers here. Then there's the matter of the location that they set this in. They always want the show to be gritty, they want it to be real, so every episode is set in a real location. And they just happen to set this episode in Terlingua, Texas, which they frame as a dusty shithole completely overwhelmed by crime. They get there and it's literally like migrant heads, coyotes, thugs, drug dealers, tumbleweeds. CBS didn't actually pay anyone to fly out and visit this town, so I have to assume that they chose it by opening Google Maps and being like, that looks dry. They have the sheriff say this twice just to really hone it in, that she left Brooklyn to semi-retire, but it's worse here. And I have to say, I have a bone to pick with you people, because I've actually been to Terlingua, because it's the town nearest the entrance of Big Bend National Park, and it is lovely. It's a little eerie because there are only like 100 people that actually live there, but that also means that tourists vastly outnumber locals, and since almost everyone is a tourist, most of the people you see there are white. The biggest businesses are like a souvenir shop, a bar, and an old woman who sells woven rugs on the side of the road. This episode, in my opinion, is literally nothing but fear-mongering, making a place to look like somewhere that it's totally not, because people all over the country saw that episode, and that's what they're all gonna think it's actually like. And if you think that's what it's like, you're gonna be scared. And if you're more scared of the US-Mexico border, you're more likely to want a big ugly wall there instead of like this. There are just so many ways this story is actively harmful to immigrants. Again, this cop and immigration advocate have this argument that is very like, everyone is getting an equal amount of screen time to vocalize their different opinions. But because they make the immigrant journey out to seem so universally harmful, and they don't even care to mention why these people might want to leave where they came from, it kind of seems like, from an audience perspective, that these people were a little silly to leave. Just go back. An uninformed viewer, which, let's be honest, most viewers are, could look at these people and be like, can't they just go back to the police state with the puppet dictator that the US installed in a violent coup? Hello? There's also a cop that gets to say, because of all this immigration stuff, things just like, they used to be different. They just like, aren't how they used to be.
We're not gonna get very far if you keep arguing about illegals with everyone. This place used to be different. How do you mean? I don't know, just different.
Which begs the question, to when were referring? Back to when Texas was Spain? Back to when it was Mexico? Be real. Most importantly, this highlights a huge problem with cop shows, because this is a procedural before anything else, which means it has to end with the main characters solving the problem. Otherwise, it wouldn't be episodic, and the audience wouldn't be able to tune in to whatever episode they wanted. If the problems weren't solved, the entire Criminal Minds watching audience would have to tune in every week without fail, which, I'm not sure who's old enough to remember this, but like, wasn't actually the point of a lot of TV back in 2005 when this was made. So that means that cops, at the end of every episode, always solve the problem. And they always have to be right, because who wants to watch a show about average people who make mistakes? Not me. And if we're watching it on our lazy boys, so are cops. And if you're a cop and you watch these shows and you're more convinced that cops are always right, it feels less like a crime to think to yourself, obviously I have to bust down this door and I have to shoot to kill. A beautiful blonde college student is about to be disemboweled right now. This mindset is always compounded by institutionalized but also very personal racism. Because obviously, if these kind of shows imply that cops are always right about their hunches, a lot of freaking cops always have a hunch that brown people are up to no good. This episode to be depressing, made me think of those recent reports of suspected Guatemalan gang members being sent from America to a prison with no due process and hope of release. Because that's pretty much what happened in the show, right? When the feds saw these guys outside the sheriff's office, calling them a small army, like basically assuming the worst of them immediately. And they were right. Those guys were written to be huge scumbags, so obviously that's exactly what they turned out to be. But what if the person you sent away is just a guy? And what then? Do you go to therapy about it? Or do we all entrench ourselves even further into this disgusting self-fulfilling prophecy? So like, I don't know. I grew up on Psych and Monk, and then later I graduated to Criminal Minds when I wanted to be edgy. And these are shows I'm like weirdly comforted by. But like, can we even have cop shows anymore? And if we can't, what are all the couch potatoes of the world to do without 18 million SVUs to catch up on? I'd maybe watch baby TV with a cat. It's pretty fun. I've tried that. Read Anna Karenina? I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I think Poker Face might be a good recent example of a procedural show that doesn't have to be about a cop. From what I've seen of it, I think it's pretty fun and engaging. I don't know. Maybe I would just appreciate something that makes being countercultural aspirational. See? This is what Reaganism took from us. Final answer, I don't know what the best alternative is, but I do know that as a society, we should go back to making burnouts cooler than cops. It won't save us, but it might help a few juries make some less biased decisions, and it sure as hell saved me from a day of getting angry when I was just trying to relax on the couch. And isn't that enough? I don't know if you can hear, but my roommate's having like a very intense discussion with the cat outside. Well, if you made it this far, thank you. If anything, I just hope that you had something decent to listen to while you were making your ramen, because that's certainly when I watch the most of my YouTube. Have a lovely day, and if you happen to enjoy the video, a like or a subscribe would certainly help me a lot. Thank you so much. I will see you the next time I'm furious about something. Bye!